Garrett Crawford was a man of routine. Every evening just after sunset, the 58-year-old Texas rancher walked out to his equipment barn to check the tractor. Same boots, same path, same flashlight. But one night, Garrett walked out into the warm October dusk and never came back. His truck was untouched. His tools were undisturbed. His keys, wallet, and phone were all inside the house. There was no sign of a struggle, only a single wrench beneath the tractor, as if he'd set it down and vanished. For 4 years, his family searched. The land went dry, the town forgot, until a jogger and her dog, just looking for a morning trail, dug up something that had no business being there. A bundle of clothes, a cowboy hat, and a turtle shell. This isn't just a missing persons case, it's a hidden war. And Garrett, he was never missing. He was silenced. Welcome to Echo Stories. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories. Part 1, The Night the Lights Stayed On. October 22nd, 2008. Outside El Paso. Garrett Crawford's life was quiet, dusty, and hard-earned. He inherited the land from his father, hundreds of acres of dry ranch country, lined with rusted barbed wire and heat-shimmering roads. He lived with his wife, Sarah, and managed to keep the lights on despite the drought and debt eating into their savings. That night, he told Sarah he was going to check the generator. The porch light flicked off behind him as he disappeared into the dark. He never came back. When Sarah went to look, the barn door was open. The generator was fine. Garrett's flashlight was on the ground, still lit. His hat was gone. That was the last moment he was ever seen alive. Authorities searched everything: trailers, arroyos, canyons. No tracks, no blood, no note. They even brought in bum. The scent died in the middle of the barn like Garrett had evaporated. Rumors spread fast. Some said he ran away from debt. Others whispered cartel. But Sarah knew her husband, and she knew Garrett would never leave his land. Whatever happened that night, it didn't start with Garrett. It started with a deal in a door he never should have opened. Part 2, The Debt and the Deal. In the months leading up to Garrett Crawford's disappearance, his ranch was falling apart. The wells were drying up. The hay didn't sell. The last 2 ranch hands had quit. And Sarah, his wife, found him one night in the kitchen, staring blankly at a repossessed notice from the bank. That's when a man named Dale Rower entered the picture. He wasn't a banker, not exactly. He claimed he could make the debt go away for a price. He said all Garrett had to do was let a few trucks pass through the property at night. No questions asked. Garrett said no, then yes, then regretted it immediately. Because those trucks weren't carrying cattle feed or fencing wire. They were carrying duffel bags and armed men. Garrett knew something was wrong. The second drop-off brought different men speaking Spanish and watching the ranch house too closely. Sarah told police later, he said they'd promised it was just once a week, but it started happening every other night. And Garrett started sleeping with his shotgun leaned against the bedpost. A week before he vanished, and he made a call to the local sheriff's office but hung up before giving his name. He also wrote a check, $1,750, made out to himself but never cashed it. Why? Because Garrett was preparing to run. Not from the law, but from the men he let in. He told Sarah he was going to end it, that he had something to say to one of the men the next time they came. She begged him not to confront them. But Garrett was tired of being a pawn, and a few nights later, he disappeared. No witnesses, no struggle, just a flashlight and silence. Part 3, The Desert Yields a Clue. 4 years passed. Sarah Crawford eventually lost the ranch. The bank took what the drought hadn't. Garrett's name faded from headlines. His photo collected dust on a bulletin board inside the sheriff's office. Until April 2012. Maria Sanchez, an early morning runner, was out jogging along an old utility path in the desert north of El Paso with her dog Buster, a retired K9 with too much energy. That morning, Buster suddenly veered off the trail and began digging furiously beneath a slab of sandstone. Maria thought he'd caught a rabbit, but what he unearthed was something far darker. Wrapped in a torn piece of oilcloth was a bundle of folded men's clothing, weather-faded and brittle. Inside the bundle was a cowboy hat duct-taped around the brim, a single worn belt buckle engraved with the initials GC, and a sun-bleached turtle shell balanced carefully on top like a marker. Maria called 911. When detectives arrived, they immediately recognized the buckle it had belonged to Garrett Crawford. But it wasn't a grave. There were no bones, only a message. Detective Rivas, who'd worked the original case, went silent when he saw the shell, because he'd seen it before. In Cartel messages, the turtle shell wasn't random. It was a calling card, and what it meant was terrifying. Whoever buried this didn't just want Garrett gone, they wanted the world to know why. Because in the desert's language, a turtle shell didn't just mean death, it meant betrayal. Part 4, The Language of Fear. The turtle shell wasn't just a desert oddity, it was a symbol used by drug cartels to mark someone who had snitched or betrayed them. Placing it atop a man's clothes, that was a warning. Garrett Crawford hadn't just disappeared, he'd been made an example. Detective Rivas reached out to federal agents with the DEA. They confirmed what he feared. The turtle shell had been used before in borderland executions tied to cartel retaliation. It was a message to locals, keep your mouth shut, stay out of cartel business. But it also unlocked a lead. Rivas and the DEA retraced Garrett's contacts, especially those near the property. And the name Dale Rower came up again. Rower had since moved to New Mexico, started a shipping company, and claimed no knowledge of Garrett's disappearance. But his phone records, when subpoenaed, told a different story. He had spoken with a man named Hector Morales, a known cartel enforcer, multiple times the same week Garrett vanished. The feds arrested Morales on unrelated charges. But during questioning, he made a quiet confession. The rancher, he talked too much, said he was going to the police. They told me to clean it up. I did. Morales said Garrett had been taken from his own barn, driven into the desert, and executed. His body burned, scattered, but the clothing deliberately buried with the turtle shell and his hat to send a message to anyone else considering betrayal. That message took 4 years to reach the surface, and it was a dogbuster that finally dragged it into the light. Part 5, The Final Reckoning. With Hector Morales' confession and the recovered evidence, the case was finally brought to a close. Garrett Crawford was officially declared murdered in connection with cartel activity, and his name cleared of all suspicions. The story rocked El Paso. People who once whispered that Garrett had skipped town now lowered their eyes in shame. But for Sarah Crawford, it was a mix of heartbreak and peace. She stood over the sandstone marker where Garrett's clothes had been found and whispered, "You didn't run, you stood up." A memorial plaque was placed there months later. Just a small steel plate that reads, "Garrett Crawford. He refused to be silent." Dale Rower was charged with conspiracy and accessory to murder. Morales received a life sentence. But the deeper message remained. Garrett had tried to protect his land. And when he realized what he'd let in, he stood up alone against a system built on fear. His silence had been forced, but his story spoke louder than any threat. And it was a dog, a jogger, and a turtle shell that finally gave him his voice back. If this story moved you, share it. Let others know about Garrett Crawford, about the people who fight for what's right even when the world turns its back. Subscribe to Echo Stories for true crime that cuts deeper, stories of courage and the unexpected details that expose buried truths. Because sometimes justice takes time, but it always finds its way back to the surface.